On a scorching July afternoon in 2019, the illusion of suburban tranquility in Riverside was shattered by an event that would leave a lasting impact on the community. At the center of this shocking incident were the Hendersons. Thaddeus, a 45-year-old investment banker known for his relentless work ethic and community involvement, and his wife, Margot, a 43-year-old part-time yoga instructor celebrated for her vibrant personality and infectious laughter. The Hendersons had been a staple of the community for over a decade, with a marriage that seemed enviable to many. Next door lived the Coopers, Elaine, a widow, and her 19-year-old son, Liam, a college sophomore home for the summer. They had moved in 5 years prior, and although they kept more to themselves than others, they were generally well-liked by their neighbors. No one could have foreseen how their ordinary lives would intersect with the Hendersons in such a devastating way. Thaddeus Henderson was a man driven by ambition. Born to working-class parents in rural Iowa, he clawed his way up the social ladder through sheer determination and an almost obsessive work ethic. By his early 30s, he had established himself as a rising star in a financial firm, earning admiration for his sharp analytical mind and no-nonsense approach to wealth management. Margot, formerly known as Margot Sinclair, had a different path. Raised by a college professor and an artist, she grew up in an environment that valued creativity and self-expression. She pursued modern dance at university, dreaming of a career on stage, but a knee injury during her senior year forced her to pivot toward yoga and wellness coaching. Their paths crossed at a charity gala in 2003. Thaddeus, already successful but lacking in social finesse, was instantly drawn to Margot's vivacity and charm. For Margot, Thaddeus represented stability and the promise of a comfortable life that would allow her to pursue her passions without financial worry. They married a year later in a lavish ceremony that became the talk of their social circle. The early years of their marriage were joyful. Thaddeus's career flourished, and he took pride in providing Margot with the lifestyle he believed she deserved. Margot, in turn, embraced her role as the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinner parties and attending events crucial for Thaddeus's networking. She also found fulfillment teaching yoga part-time, helping others achieve balance and inner peace. However, as time went on, cracks began to appear in their carefully curated life. Thaddeus's work hours lengthened as he chased bigger deals and clients, rarely making it home before 9 p.m. Even when he was physically present, his mind was often elsewhere, glued to his phone for emails or market updates. Approaching her 40s, Margot found herself increasingly restless. The yoga classes and charity committees that once filled her days felt empty, and she questioned the choices that led her to this point, wondering if she had traded her dreams for a gilded cage. Their inability to conceive, despite years of trying, added another layer of strain. By the summer of 2019, the Hendersons' marriage was a well-maintained facade. Outwardly, they still appeared to be the golden couple. Thaddeus excelled at work, closing a deal that put him in line for a partnership, while Margot's yoga classes thrived. Yet, behind closed doors, they were strangers. Conversations, when they happened, were perfunctory, centering on schedules and social obligations. Physical intimacy was rare, each touch burdened with unspoken resentments and unmet expectations. Neither Thaddeus nor Margot was willing to admit how far they had drifted apart. Maintaining the illusion of a happy marriage was easier than confronting the emptiness between them. This unacknowledged rift was about to become the catalyst for a tragedy that would ripple through the entire Riverside community. The Coopers moved next door to the Hendersons in 2014 after Elaine's husband, Dr. Reginald Cooper, a respected oncologist, succumbed to the very disease he dedicated his life to fighting. Elaine, a soft-spoken librarian, initially struggled to adjust to life in Riverside, moving to escape the haunting memories of their old home in St. Paul. The affluent suburb felt alien to her, and she found solace in her books and her garden, which soon became the envy of the neighborhood. Liam was 14 when they moved in, a lanky, introverted teenager more comfortable with computers than people. The transition to a new school was challenging, and he often found himself targeted by bullies who mocked his secondhand clothes and quiet demeanor. Thaddeus Henderson took Liam under his wing, offering him a job mowing lawns and doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. Over the next 5 years, Liam blossomed. The awkward teen grew into a handsome young man, his natural intelligence finally finding an outlet in his computer science studies at university. Despite his growing confidence, Liam remained devoted to his mother, worried about her isolation and loneliness, and made a point of coming home most weekends. It was during one of these weekend visits in early June that he first encountered Margot Henderson in a new light. Elaine often spoke of Margot's generosity, unaware of the complex emotions brewing beneath the surface of her son's polite nods. The spark that ignited the affair between Margot and Liam was as unexpected as it was intense. It happened during one of the Hendersons' legendary summer barbecues. Thaddeus was entertaining his colleagues near the grill, regaling them with tales of his latest financial coup. Feeling isolated amidst the crowd, Margot retreated to the quiet of the pool house to replenish the ice bucket. Liam, dragged to the party by his mother, entered the pool house, not realizing it was occupied. He found Margot struggling with a bag of ice. Their eyes met, and something shifted. He moved to help, their hands brushing. They stood momentarily frozen, the cold of the ice contrasting sharply with the heat building between them. Margot broke the silence, thanking him in a husky voice. Liam, usually articulate, stammered in response. That brief encounter set the stage for what was to come. Over the next few weeks, Margot and Liam found reasons to be in each other's company. Margot asking for help with her laptop, Liam offering to assist in her garden. Each interaction was charged with an undercurrent of attraction they both tried to ignore. Their first kiss happened almost a month after the barbecue. Liam was helping Margot set up for a yoga class in the park. As they finished, a sudden summer storm broke out, and they ran for shelter under a nearby gazebo, laughing and breathless as the rain poured down. Margot looked at Liam and felt a surge of desire she hadn't experienced in years. Before she could think better of it, she leaned in and kissed him. From that point, their affair escalated quickly. They were reckless, driven by a combination of Liam's youthful passion and Margot's desperation to feel alive again. They met in secluded spots around town, in the back row of the local cinema, in a hidden corner of the library, and most dangerously, in the Henderson home when Thaddeus was at work. Each encounter left them craving more, the gulf in their ages forgotten, in the heat of their stolen moments. Margot felt rejuvenated, rediscovering parts of herself she thought lost. Liam was intoxicated by Margot's experience and the taboo nature of their relationship. But as the summer wore on, the strain of maintaining their secret began to show. Close calls became more frequent, a neighbor almost catching them in an embrace, a suspicious glance from Elaine when Margot's name came up too often. The guilt also began to weigh on them. Liam struggled with the knowledge that he was betraying Thaddeus, a man who had been kind to him. Margot found herself lying more to her husband, each deception another crack in the foundation of her marriage. Yet, despite the risks and guilt, neither seemed able to end the affair. Caught in a whirlwind of passion and need, July 15th, 2019, dawned hot and humid, the air heavy with the promise of an approaching storm. For Thaddeus Henderson, it began like any other day. He left for the office before Margot stirred from sleep. Margot woke later, her mind racing with plans. Thaddeus had mentioned he'd be working late for a crucial client dinner that could seal his partnership deal. For Margot, this meant an opportunity. She texted Liam, her heart racing as she suggested he come over that afternoon. Liam, agonizing over the affair for days, saw this as a chance to end things face to face. He replied with a simple, "Okay," resolving to break it off before things spiraled further. The day passed slowly for both. Margot went through her yoga class with unusual nervous energy, while Liam found it hard to focus on his summer job. At 2:30 p.m., Liam made his way next door, glancing around to ensure no neighbors were watching. Margot ushered him in quickly, her face a mix of excitement and anxiety. Liam began to say they needed to talk, but Margot, misreading his intent and driven by a need to feel desired, cut him off with a passionate kiss. Despite his reservations, Liam responded, his resolve weakening. What happened next was a blur of discarded clothes and tangled limbs as they made their way to the master bedroom, all thoughts of ending the affair forgotten. Meanwhile, across town, Thaddeus sat in his office, frustrated by numbers that wouldn't add up in his presentation. Making a snap decision, he decided to go home to regroup, planning to return to the office later before dinner. At 3:45 p.m., Thaddeus pulled into his driveway. He noticed Liam Cooper's old Honda parked a little way down the street, but thought nothing of it, assuming Liam was helping Elaine with something. Unlocking the front door, Thaddeus immediately sensed that something was off. The house was unusually quiet, and a half-empty glass of wine sat on the coffee table, a rare sight for that time of day. He heard a faint sound from upstairs and frowned as he climbed the stairs. As he approached the master bedroom, the noise grew louder. What he saw when he opened the door would be forever seared into his memory. Margot, the woman he had loved for 15 years, was in their bed with Liam Cooper, the young man he had mentored and trusted. Thaddeus erupted with a roar of rage and pain, lunging forward with his hands, usually reserved for manipulating numbers and shaking hands on business deals, now curled into fists. He grabbed Liam, yanking him off the bed as Margot screamed, scrambling to cover herself and separate the two men. Her efforts were in vain. Thaddeus's first punch caught Liam squarely in the jaw, sending him stumbling backward. Driven by adrenaline and fear, Liam fought back. The two men grappled, crashing into the dresser and sending framed photos and trinkets scattering across the floor. In the chaos, no one noticed the heavy crystal bookend that fell from the dresser's top. The bookend went unnoticed until Thaddeus, in a fit of blind rage, grabbed it and brought it down on Liam's head with a sickening thud. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence that followed. Liam crumpled to the floor, blood pooling rapidly around his motionless form. Margot's scream pierced the air as the full horror of what had just transpired hit them all. In that moment, as storm clouds gathered outside and sirens wailed in the distance, the lives of everyone involved were irrevocably changed. The idyllic facade of Riverside had been shattered, and nothing would ever be the same again. The piercing wail of police sirens shattered the usual tranquility of the neighborhood. Neighbors peered out from behind curtains, curiosity mingling with apprehension, as squad cars and an ambulance screeched to a halt in front of the Henderson residence. The first officers on the scene were met with a tableau of horror that would haunt them for years. Inside, they found a shell-shocked Thaddeus Henderson, his hands covered in blood, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. Margot, barely clothed and hysterical, was in shock. The room bore all the marks of a violent struggle. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, and smears of blood on the hardwood floor. Detective Ava Rossi, a veteran of the police department's homicide unit, took charge of the scene. Her first priority was securing medical attention for Liam Cooper. As paramedics worked feverishly to stabilize him, Rossi began the delicate process of piecing together the events that had led to this tragedy. Thaddeus, still in a state of shock, was taken into custody without resistance. Margot was questioned separately, their stories fragmented and emotional, painting a picture of a long, simmering marital discord that had exploded into violence. As word spread through the neighborhood, a crowd began to gather at the police cordon. Among them was Elaine Cooper, who collapsed in grief when informed of her son's critical condition. She was quickly taken to the hospital, where Liam was fighting for his life in the intensive care unit. The investigation moved quickly. Forensics teams combed through the Henderson home, collecting evidence and taking photographs. The crystal bookend, now a potential murder weapon, was carefully bagged and tagged. Neighbors were interviewed, their statements adding context to the relationships between the Hendersons and the Coopers. One neighbor recalled hearing raised voices from the Henderson house earlier that afternoon, but had dismissed it as a television playing too loudly. Another mentioned seeing Liam enter the Henderson home around 2:30 p.m., noting it because he thought it odd given Thaddeus's usual work schedule. As night fell, the gravity of the situation became clear. Liam Cooper was pronounced dead at 9:47 p.m., never having regained consciousness. The charge against Thaddeus Henderson was elevated from assault to second-degree murder. In the days that followed, more details emerged. Margot, racked with guilt and facing intense scrutiny, admitted to the affair with Liam. Her statement, given through tears at the police station, provided a timeline of their relationship and the events leading up to that fateful afternoon. Thaddeus, advised by his attorney, remained silent. His colleagues at the company painted a picture of a man under immense pressure, working long hours in pursuit of a partnership that had seemed within reach. None, however, had suspected the depth of his marital problems or the capacity for violence that had been unleashed. The case against Thaddeus Henderson was building, but Rossi knew that in the court of public opinion, there would be no clear villains or heroes in this story. Only victims, each in their own way, of the secrets and lies that had finally come to light in the most devastating manner possible. But no one could have anticipated the plot twist that was about to come, a twist that would shock everyone. including the Hendersons themselves. The Henderson trial began on a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after the events that had shaken Riverside to its core. The county courthouse, a stately building of red brick and white columns, was surrounded by reporters and curious onlookers. Inside, the tension was palpable as the judge called the court to order. Prosecuting attorney Veronica Talbot, known for her sharp mind and even sharper tongue, laid out the state's case in her opening statement. She painted a vivid picture of Thaddeus Henderson as a man consumed by rage and jealousy who had brutally murdered a young man in the prime of his life. Talbot's words were measured but impactful, her gaze sweeping across the jury as she promised to prove Henderson's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Defense attorney Michael Sterling countered with a narrative of his own. He portrayed Thaddeus as a devoted husband and pillar of the community, pushed to the brink by a betrayal of the deepest kind. Sterling suggested that the death was a tragic accident, the result of a confrontation that had spiraled out of control. As the trial progressed, a parade of witnesses took the stand. Forensic experts testified about blood spatter patterns and the force required to cause Liam's fatal injury. Neighbors recounted the events of that day, and character witnesses spoke to the personalities and reputations of both Thaddeus and Liam. But it was Margot Henderson's testimony that captivated the courtroom. Over 2 grueling days on the stand, she laid bare the disintegration of her marriage and the evolution of her relationship with Liam. Her voice trembled as she described the moment Thaddeus had walked in on them and the horror of watching the confrontation unfold. Under cross-examination, Sterling tried to paint her as an unfaithful wife, whose actions had driven her husband to temporary insanity. But Margot held firm, accepting her part in the tragedy while insisting that nothing justified Liam's death. Elaine Cooper's testimony was brief but powerful. Still grief-stricken, she spoke of her son's kindness and his dreams for the future, all cut short in an act of violence. Her quiet dignity in the face of unimaginable loss moved many in the courtroom to tears. As the trial neared its end, all eyes turned to Thaddeus Henderson. Against his lawyer's advice, he chose to take the stand. His testimony was a study in contrasts, moments of apparent remorse interspersed with flashes of the anger that had led to Liam's death. He spoke of the pressure he had been under at work, the growing distance in his marriage, and the shock of discovering his wife's infidelity. When describing the fight with Liam, Thaddeus claimed he had never intended to cause serious harm, that he had simply lost control. The psychological analyses presented during the trial offered a complex picture of human behavior and motivation. They highlighted how a combination of personal history, societal expectations, and immediate circumstances could collide to create a perfect storm of tragedy. After 7 grueling weeks of testimony, evidence presentation, and legal arguments, the fate of Thaddeus Henderson rested in the hands of the jury. As Judge Blackwell sent the 12 men and women to deliberate, a tense silence fell over the courtroom. After a short recess to consider all factors, Judge Blackwell returned to deliver her sentence. Citing the violent nature of the crime, balanced against Thaddeus's lack of prior criminal history and the unique circumstances of the case, she sentenced him to 18 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 12 years. As Thaddeus was led away in handcuffs, the full weight of the tragedy seemed to descend upon the courtroom. There were no victors here, only lives irrevocably altered by a moment of passion and a split second of violence. Outside, as news of the verdict spread, the crowd's reactions were mixed. Some felt justice had been served, while others argued the sentence was too harsh or too lenient. But all agreed on one thing: the events that had unfolded in Riverside would leave an indelible mark